Hello my little jam tarts, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Self-Love September. I'm putting out 13 videos over the course of this month talking about various different aspects of self-love because I am admittedly a little bit obsessed with that topic, sorry not sorry, and this fourth episode is going to be basically about childhood bullying, the effects of childhood bullying, how it might affect your ability to love yourself and how to move past it and heal. So obviously I'm aware that bullying can occur at any time during the human lifespan, but I chose to focus specifically on childhood bullying for this video because I think the effects of childhood bullying are quite specific, and I think people who were bullied in childhood, particularly at school, by the other kids at school or in a social setting in their neighbourhood or whatever, do tend to share some characteristics in common with each other. And I do think as well that there are a lot of members of my audience who experience childhood bullying. Certainly I think it's quite a common thing among people who end up in this kind of psycho-spiritual world. There are reasons we end up here, and there are characteristics and personality traits that we have exhibited for a very long time which may have made us into targets in the playground or caused other kids to bully us or project their shadowy bits and pieces onto us. So that's why a lot of us share this common theme of having been bullied in childhood. I think one of the things that is so sad about people who've experienced childhood bullying is that they very often try to downplay the effects that it has on them in later life. They may pressure themselves to forget about the incident, just stop thinking about it, stop being affected by it, and they may shame themselves if they do find that they have flashbacks from the bullying, or they might give themselves a really hard time if they misread certain situations or certain relationships because they've been bullied in childhood and they're getting those flashbacks or things are occurring to them that might be skewing their perspective. So I think the most important thing to note right at the beginning of this video is do not berate yourself if you are still affected by the bullying you experienced in childhood. Don't tell yourself it should all be over by now and you are weak or pathetic for not being able to deal with it or not being able to leave it behind. It's actually a really potent, significant experience that can very much affect the relationships that you go on to have in life. In the school playground or with other children that aren't in your immediate family, you get really your very first taste of what the outside society is like and what group dynamics are like. So it's really the first time that you step outside of your family setting and you start to interact with human beings from other families and you form community and group dynamics start to happen. So if your very first experiences of that group dynamic setting were of you being bullied, rejected, alienated, left alone, made to feel like crap, it's probably likely that you're going to spend at least a bit of your adulthood, if not many years of it, worried that you are going to be bullied by people you've only just met, worried that you are going to be rejected if you try to come into a group or engage in community. Those worries will very often be there at the back of your mind because some of your very earliest conditioning in relation to non-familial group dynamics was conditioning which really contained a lot of bullying and a lot of rejection and a lot of crappy low feelings. So it makes sense that this is something that comes back to haunt a person time and time again in their adulthood. Some people who were bullied during their childhood find it almost impossible to believe that people that they connect with in adulthood are not going to bully them in some way. And it can leave them feeling really paranoid, really insecure, and they may even behave in ways that are regrettable or out of alignment with how they really want to behave and how they truly are, because they feel such paranoia and such pent-up sense of nervousness about whether or not they're going to be the victim of bullying, whether or not they're going to be targeted. If you can relate to this kind of thing, if you're listening to what I'm saying and you're thinking, yeah, this is definitely something that I've been through as a victim of childhood bullying, then carry on watching. I'm hoping some of the tips and the suggestions are going to be really useful for you. If anything, I think survivors of childhood bullying could really stand to talk about it more than they do, and rather than silencing themselves or kind of trying to downplay the effects of it, sometimes it really helps to just talk about it, have conversations with other people and normalise those conversations so that we all feel as though we are better equipped to talk about bullying rather than brushing it under the rug. Sadly, there is quite a big culture of silencing around bullying, and I think when we normalise the conversations about bullying that we've experienced and things that we've been through, we directly go against that culture of silencing, and we say, you know, that it's okay to come out and talk about bullying, that it's important, that we need to normalise that dialogue. And I think that's important as well, obviously, for generations that come up underneath us. Kids need to know that it's okay to say. Something is happening, something is going on, I don't feel happy, I don't feel like this is right, you know. Being the victim of bullying can often be something that's very much shrouded in suppression. It's downplayed a lot. Maybe you don't know whether or not to say anything. Maybe you think it might make the bullying worse. Maybe you don't know where to turn, and maybe you're just trying to deny it and carry on and see if you can solve the problem yourself. There's loads of various reasons why a kid might not speak up about bullying in childhood. One of the reasons that I come across time and time again when I talk to people about childhood bullying is not feeling as though the teachers would do anything about it, not feeling as though the school faculty provided a supportive and safe framework. And that's something that really saddens me, and it's something I experienced in my own childhood as well. Talking about your experiences of being bullied, I think, can be really cathartic, and it can be really healthy. If you've spent ages suppressing it, if you've not really talked about it for a long time, but it does bother you sometimes, and it does leave you feeling unsettled when certain things come around in the Rolodex that is your memory bank, it can be really great to just converse and actually just vent and get that stuff off your chest. And when you do that, it's also really helpful for other people, because like I said, there is that culture of silence and suppression and not talking about it when adulthood rolls around. And so you might actually be giving somebody else the permission that they've been waiting for to also just vent and get things off their chest too. Talking to other people who experience bullying in childhood, who experience rejection and loneliness in childhood, can be really useful. You can share that empathy. You can connect with somebody whose experiences may mirror your own in some ways, and that might actually kind of be a cure somewhat for those feelings of loneliness that still kind of reverberate into adulthood. Even if you don't feel lonely, as you know, in general, even if you don't feel like right now in your adult life that's where you are and that's your situation, those strong pangs of memories, those reverberations, they can really carry through into adulthood. And like I said, they can affect our relationships and the group dynamics that we have with others. They can affect the strength of our connections and how secure we feel in our connections. So talking to other people who've been through similar things can be really useful, sharing that empathy and really just forging that connection, and maybe even strategizing, thinking about different ways that you can get a handle on it and move through it and heal from it. If you are listening to this and you were a victim of childhood bullying and you're thinking to yourself, I have not talked about this for a really long time, this is not something that I have discussed, I have not put it on the table, I haven't told my partner about it, or I don't really try and think about it anymore actively, but it does bother me and it does come up for me, maybe you might want to try broaching it in a conversation with a loved one, with a partner, with a friend, with a therapist or counsellor, whoever you feel might be the appropriate person. Sometimes I haven't talked about a particular thing that I experienced for years and years, and then it will start affecting me, it will start visiting me, I will start getting memories, and it will usually be because of something that's going on in my life at the present time, things I'm grappling with that are kind of tying in to something that happened years ago on the timeline of my life. And I have very much learned not to shame myself for wanting to talk about it, and I actually really delight in holding space for loved ones in my life who want to talk about something that happened a really long time ago. They just want to process it, they just want to give some focus and some attention to it as a significant thing that happened on the timeline. And they might feel weird about it at first, or a bit like, oh, this is stupid, I don't know why I want to talk about this, it's so silly. And I'll always be like, no, like, get it out, it's okay. If you need to revisit something, then you need to revisit it, and that's okay. Don't shame yourself for that. That could be really powerful, it could be something that you really need to do. Of course, you also don't need to speak to another person about it. You can choose to make art referring to it, you can write a journal entry about it, you can really just converse with yourself about anything that you might need to vent. Some of the most important things that I really want you to try and take to heart, or at least put on the table for consideration, are that it wasn't your fault, it shouldn't have happened like that, and you can thrive in spite of it. People do thrive in spite of it. And maybe right now, if you're listening to me and you're thinking, no, it's something that really deeply affected me and it's gonna last and last, then maybe your job just at the moment is to believe that that might be a possibility for you. Just see it as a distant possibility. People do bounce back from these kinds of things all the time. When you're a kid and you just want to fit in and you just want to make friends and you just want to feel accepted and you just want to feel loved and safe and okay with being who you are, being rejected by other children and being the target for other children can be really traumatizing, and it can make you feel like there is something inherently wrong with you. And if you don't get that support from teacher or from home, if you don't really tell anyone about it, or even if you do tell adults and the bullying continues regardless, you might really start to get a complex about who you are as a human being. So it is very important in the now to tell yourself that there is nothing wrong with you as a human being, and it's really important that you to nurture that younger part of you that might really still be feeling that might really still be, you know, convinced that they are not worthy in some way, they are broken in some way, they are unacceptably different. Here's the thing that always really makes me so happy and that makes me sort of smile and lighten up whenever I think about this topic. Isn't it amazing the amount of astounding, kick-ass, kindred fucking spirits you meet over the course of your lifetime who also were bullied as children, who also had these shitty negative experiences, who also felt rejected or were made to feel isolated or were targeted in some way. Isn't it amazing how weirdos congregate together like moths around the flames of creativity and occultism, and it's just like a big party where somehow we all sort of sat-naved together. And so many of us have had these really crappy experiences where, far from school being the best years of your life, they were definitely among the worst years of our lives. And it's just really awesome to see that happen. And sometimes I think it's really about turning it all on its head and thinking, wow, I really needed to just find my people, and I really needed to find those subcultures or those connections, those friendships, those communities, those resources that made me feel more plugged into myself and made me realise that, yeah, okay, I am maybe different from the majority of people around me, but there are places that I belong. There are places where I buzz at the same frequency as a bunch of other people who also were maybe ridiculed for it or made to feel like pushed out or rejected. Some people who are seeking to heal from childhood bullying may feel like looking back over the experiences and the memories and kind of doing a bit of an excavation in order to figure out why their childhood bully behaved that way, or if there were multiple bullies, you know, what happened here, like what was the reason, and really just seeking to understand it from more of a psychological point of view and understanding it in terms of human behaviour. Whether you want to do that or you don't want to do that, I just want to reassure you that any reasons that you might have found for the bullies targeting you are absolutely, again, not your fault. And if you feel like you could be armed and comforted and bolstered by having a deeper understanding of why things happened the way that they did, then obviously you can put it under a microscope. You can go back to the memories, you can look at them, and you can think, what happened here, and get that clearer understanding if you want to, or feel like you are making headway with understanding why things occurred on the timeline of your life. But if you don't want to do that, it's not really going to hamper your healing journey, I don't think. Sometimes the kids that are different, the kids that represent something that the other kids have been taught societally or culturally not to be, is going to attract negative attention. There are so many kids who are growing up trying to fit in and trying their best to kind of, you know, assimilate, and they do a good job of that. And then there are other kids who, for whatever reason, whether it's their behaviour, whether it's something to do with their race or the way that they look, there's a number of different reasons, are going to be the kids who unfortunately are going to be the sticking pole for the shadow of the children around them. And of course it really is a little microcosm of the macrocosm. What happens in school also can happen in life, and that's why we need to be raising our consciousness and doing that psycho-spiritual work in order to avoid that happening in adulthood, because when it happens in adulthood, sweet Jesus Lord, things can get a hell of a lot worse than they ever do in the playground. Christ. While I'm on the subject of looking back over the memories and kind of excavating the experiences of childhood bullying, you may find that when you do that, it's a very hard pill to swallow to recognise that some of the adults around you failed you in some way. They weren't looking out for you. They weren't listening to you. They didn't believe you. Maybe they didn't create the kinds of safe spaces that you required in order to open your mouth and say, something's happening to me, I'm not happy, I'm scared, or whatever the case may be. And so sometimes when you recognise those things and you see those things in the rearview mirror, that can be extremely painful. And sometimes there is a journey to go on where you feel your feelings about that, and your feelings may include disappointment, sadness, anger, loss, frustration, you know. And sometimes it's important to carve out a space to feel those feelings. At the same time though, you have to know that you are now the adult. You are the adult that is chiefly responsible for protecting the inner child that still lives inside you, and it is now your decision of whether you are ultimately going to fail that inner child or not. You are now the one doing the work to protect the inner child from further harm, and I would definitely encourage you to see it like that. And like I said, it is sometimes important to go through whatever emotions you need to go through concerning the adults who, you know, you reached out to, who didn't listen to you, or who were dismissive of you, or not really paying attention to what was going on when you may have been been too young or too scared to really explain what was happening and that you weren't happy. And that is all completely valid work, and I would never take that away from anyone. But we must also remember that we have the accountability now as the primary caregivers of the children that live within. And I know for some people that's a bit woo-woo and it's a bit out there, and some people don't like the dialogue around inner child work, but for me that's how it makes the most sense. Because if you're still hurting and you know, you're still in the midst of those feelings from childhood, then it makes sense that somewhere inside of you, you are still reacting from that place of being a child. You are still there on some level, shamanically, right? And so for me, I think it's really important that we recognise that we are the primary caregivers of the children that live within, and it is now our responsibility. It's been passed over from the adults that were around us, rearing us during our childhood, and the principal accountability for protecting the child has now passed to us. So you kind of have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to remain in the midst of these feelings and these difficulties and ultimately let the bullies win, or whether you are now going to go on this supreme journey of healing and integration and moving onwards and thriving. It's really about obtaining your ultimate victory over the bullies by deciding that you are no longer going to let those experiences deeply influence the way that you choose to walk around in the world. It's really about fighting for justice for yourself and getting that justice and fucking enjoying it. Sometimes when it comes to childhood bullying, there are certain things, there are certain aspects of the experience that we have actually gotten over. We have forgiven, we have released, we have accepted it, we've integrated it, and there are other parts that are still bothering us on some level. So sometimes it's important for you to differentiate between the work that you need to do and the feelings that you are still feeling and dealing with versus the stuff that you have let go of and released. For example, you may really have no malice towards the bullies anymore. You may have really no fear of being bullied anymore in adulthood, but you may be feeling some feelings about a particular adult who may have failed to act, and that might be the thing that you might need to deal with. You may be a person who experienced one particular childhood bullying incident that tends to be a trigger for you when something similar happens in adulthood, and it will just flash you back to that scenario, and that might be something that you need to deal with. So there's really lots of different sorts of things that can happen. It's not necessarily that the entire experience is still haunting a person. Sometimes it's one aspect of the experience. So it might be helpful for you to sit down, be clear with yourself about the work that you still need to do and anything that you have healed from or that you feel less intense about. And it's also important to listen to that younger version of yourself at the same time. Really just try and lean into the energy of that younger version of you who was going through those things. What does that younger version of you need to say? What does that younger version of you need to express? Then you've got to let yourself indulge in that expression. You've got to allow those things to come through in your expression, whether that's through talking with somebody personally or professionally, you know, engaging in art, anything like that that you can use to kind of express anything that might still be living in there that wants to come through and wants to come out. If anyone remembers my things to do when you're feeling low video and you remember my primal pillow screaming, give that a go, because that's fucking effective. Sometimes it's a little bit too soon for this piece of advice, and if it's a little bit too soon for you, then maybe roll back around to it after you've done a little bit more work and you're kind of more sort of confident in where you are on the healing journey. But a lot of the time we can look back at childhood bullying and we can understand how it has come to make us into a more compassionate and empathetic individual. Now, some people are bullied and then they themselves become the bullies, and that might even have been your experience in childhood. But ultimately, so many people that go through the experience of being bullied understand what it's like and come through it with this desire to cause minimal harm to other human beings, and they really get that profound sense of what it's like to make somebody feel excluded or rejected or targeted, and they really try and tread lightly and softly in the world when it comes to their relationships with others. If you feel that experiences of childhood bullying actually led you probably to deeper layers of empathy and compassion than you would have had without it, then that is something to celebrate. And sometimes it's very weird when we celebrate the harshest pills and the most difficult experiences in life, but to me, it's really worth celebrating that stuff. Your experiences of childhood bullying may have helped you to grow up and recognise your own strength. Your experiences of childhood bullying may have helped you grow up and actually be able to sense when somebody around you you is being bullied or being made to feel rejected by others, and you may be somebody to extend a hand and help or fight for justice for that person in some way. Your experiences of childhood bullying may have just made you more highly sensitive and more able to detect the nuanced layers of human dynamics and come in and be of use where you can be of use, and create harmony where you can create harmony as a direct result of what you experienced that was so nasty in your own childhood. So sometimes it really helps to just have a look at the harshest, yuckiest pills we had to swallow as we were growing up, and think to ourselves, you know what though, I have allowed that to shape me in a profound way during my adulthood, and that's been a really good thing that's come out of the experience. It is possible that on some level the younger version of you is always going to react in some way or feel a little bit triggered in a certain way by something that happens that just makes you flash back to certain nasty memories. But it's about recognizing that you can minimize the result of those kinds of experiences. You do not have to let them write the story for you anymore. You can really start to believe that relationships can be different. You can really start to experience a memory or a trigger and actually have control over it and feel like, okay, I understand where that came from and I understand how it's affecting me, but I've got this whole other thing going on now. I'm moving in this bold new direction, and I'm not going to allow myself to be consistently pulled back or consistently traumatized by something that happened when I was younger. I'm not going to give my bullies that kind of satisfaction. You know, this is a new life, this is a new me, this is a new phase. And it's really about being able to find those words of power that will help you to understand that in the moment and come back to your strength in the moment. I would definitely also recommend, if you've gotten to the end of this video and you feel like it is time to express what you went through with childhood bullying, to start to heal from it, etc., definitely consider doing a ritual. Ritual is so effing powerful. Oh my sweet goddess. Ritual that confirms that you're ready to go on this journey and you want to actually start to heal from the experiences you had in childhood, and you're also ready to stop downplaying the effects of those experiences and be real with yourself about how they've affected you. That kind of ritual can really just set fire to the posh hammer. You know, it's really a way of you saying, I'm ready, I'm doing this thing. It's something that's actually out there in tangible reality, that is a commitment that you've made to yourself and to yourself as a child as well. Thank you so much for taking on these thoughts and contemplations. I really enjoyed speaking about this topic, and I hope it's helped those of you who have dealt with childhood bullying or who are trying to potentially help someone who's dealt with childhood bullying. Please let me know down in the comments, if you can and you want to, whether or not you actually were a victim of childhood bullying, how it affected you, etc., and any healing tips that you have for others who might feel like they're still very much on the path of trying to get through this. To be honest with you, sometimes even thinking about childhood bullying is just so sad, and like sometimes when I was talking about it during the course of making this video, I could feel like my jaw start to ache, you know, because it's so sad, the thought of kids doing that to each other. Ugh. Damn it, I'm so weepy, guys. Honest to God, I'll cry at anything, and I've got really, really bad PMT right now, so I'm just like but yeah, you know, it's a really shit thing, and it doesn't surprise me that people just want to tuck it away in a dark room at the back of the psyche and fucking forget about it. But if you know in your heart of hearts that it's still affecting you and it's still making you feel like crap, then maybe some of the tips in this video can get you a little bit closer to where you want to be and where you definitely deserve to be. So yeah, much love and self-love. Until next time, honeybees, blessed be.